In your body shop, there's one thing that just isn't welcome. Dust. It's the enemy. It travels around, ruins finishes, and causes work to have to be redone. It gets into everything. And on everything. It hurts your final product and your bottom line. Now, body shops can turn to a true partner for a solution. 3M, the maker of the world's finest abrasives, has teamed up with Festool Automotive Systems, the foremost maker of automotive tools, to bring you a sanding system that allows your technicians to work faster, smarter, and cleaner. For starters, everything a technician needs is nearby and ready. Workflow is improved, with less time spent looking for tools. It's compact, mobile, and intuitive. For example, if it's green, it has a function. And everything is easy to connect. Just one click and go. With a 360-degree swivel to help keep the hose from tangling. The 3M Cubitron 2 abrasives alone could save you a bundle while delivering a uniform finish. And this system was designed with technician safety in mind. With ergonomic non-slip tools that stop when you do. An IAS anti-static hose. And a dust extraction system that's HEPA certified as an entire unit, not just a filter. 3M and Festool Automotive Systems are your body shop's partner in helping you work cleaner and faster, with less rework caused by dust in the air from sanding. The new Total Automotive Sanding System. It settles the dust and raises your productivity and profits.
We are painters, a community of brothers and sisters around the world. Separated by distance, we are united in trade, in spirit, and passion. Our love for our craft is matched only by our desire to be the best at what we do. We are perfectionists. We are artists. Our studio is our booth. Our brushes are our guns. Our painting palette is 3M PPS. Our job is nothing short of making vehicles look like new again, while we race the clock to maximize cycle time. But give us the right tools, and we make it a daily occurrence. Every vehicle, every job.
Introducing the 3M PPS Series 2.0 Spray Cup System. It's the next evolution of the system that revolutionized painting. The culmination of nearly 20 years of feedback from painters around the world. Now, it's better 6 ways to help make you better.
Hey guys, welcome to Repair University Live. We are so excited to have you here today. And the topic we're going to cover, thanks Shawn for joining us.
Absolutely,
we appreciate all you're going to bring to the table, and we got a lot of questions for you today. We're going to talk corrosion protection, rust proofing. The two are different,
absolutely,
but
yep.
Both have to work together. And when we started thinking about this as a topic, I think some of us kind of, you guys said y'all been teaching ICAR since the 90s.
So this is not new.
It's not new.
We've been talking about exactly what we're going to probably go over today with some variations since 1985 probably.
Right. I pulled out an old manual from ICAR from years ago, and really not a lot has changed.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing how in 2017, especially on the Facebook, and everybody's like, well, we don't know what the process is. What do we do? And so that's why we're doing this show.
Yeah. So let's start with what anti-corrosion rust proofing is at the factory. Because we talk a lot about OEM procedures and we talk a lot about doing it like the factory or whatever, but this is the one thing we can't do like the factory. So let's walk through a little bit about what the OEs do to rust-proof, corrosion protect their vehicles.
Well, to protect weld zones, one of the advantages they have is they can dip the car. right? Mark, have you ever seen a car dipped in a shop?
Been around thousands of shops all over the country, and I have yet to see a dunk pool where they're R&I and everything and dunking the car.
So that's what technicians need to understand, is that we have to have alternative methods like cavity wax or something else that we can do that's a substitute for that, that's a close substitute, but not the same exact thing.
Yeah, we're not manufacturing the car like they are, we're remanufacturing, so we have to do things a little bit different, and it's still a proper repair.
Right.
Right. So these are kind of what's come up just really over the last couple of months on the forums that kind of sparked us to put corrosion protection a little higher on our list of discussion. But right down to the basics of how does weld-through primer work, what other coatings like epoxy primers or etch primers work, and I know we all cringe when we hear etch in association with the body shop, right? What do the OEs recommend, and what was applied at the factory, and how do I duplicate that? And there's so many questions around this. So probably the main reason why we're touching on this today is we all do a lot of re-inspections. The three of us visit a lot of cars. Shawn, you actually get a lot of re-inspections from shops over material usage, correct?
Correct, and I did some work with Verifax as well as a re-inspector.
Yeah, so he's out looking at, and we found that shops have a lot of the right equipment, right? But man, are we not doing this. These are common everyday re-inspection photos that we're running across these days. Larry, talk a little bit about those.
Well, as you can see here, there's definite burn marks on the backside of panels, which there's a mistake already that somebody didn't even clean the backside before they welded. And obviously it's a mag weld, and they didn't even clean that properly. So what else didn't they do properly? They didn't care what happened to it, and it's only going to wind up rotting and corroding more and more as time goes by. This lower picture here is a sail panel, and this could have been done correctly. From all indications, the panel was sectioned in the right area. The open butt joint was welded properly. They just never made an attempt to put any corrosion-resistant primers or anti-corrosion compounds, cavity wax or rust-proofing material that stays gooey and seeps into areas. They didn't put that in there. So this is just going to keep rotting and eventually probably show some sort of orangey, rusty red color, leaking out of the area and causing a problem that the customer's going to go, hey, wait a second, what's this from? Why does this look like, why is this, or even the body filler starts to bubble up and almost like pop off the area. And that can be an issue that, many different shops see, and customers, obviously, and then they're going to bring it back to a shop, and this is something that can come back and haunt you a few years down the road that you, weren't used to seeing. Yeah. Much like you get a car that's in an area that has seawater, and you're down by the sea, or you always put your vehicle into the launch, and now you have this corrosion that forms up, and it gets all red and rusty and stuff, and then mechanical things start to break. You don't care about this truck. I'm only going to use it for plowing, or I'm going to use it for moving, and then you get something like this starts to form, and that just goes to show this could be an issue right from the factory that they didn't anticipate that this car is going to be in that particular area, or we have this over here, which this could be a numerous causes of why this happened. This could be, I got water in the area and didn't dry it before I put material on. I didn't put the seam sealer in to get all the seams, and it got into a little spot and started to do that capillary action of seeping behind the panel, and now it's starting to blow out from in between the panels underneath the seam sealer. You brought up a good point yesterday when we found this picture about using maybe a 1K primer.
It's probably, my experience is that the picture on the left here is probably 1K self-etch primer, which we call contraband. Should never be in a body shop, the body side, and we'll talk more about that. But then the bigger problem with this is, it's not just a rust problem. That's a panel replacement problem now. You got to start over, and it's not just the panel that was replaced, it's the panel it attaches to as well, which also has to have some either work or replaced.
And I believe this was
That's
Shawn's
a 4-year-old.
picture. Yeah, it's Shawn's picture, 4 years old.
4 years old.
So this is something that comes back 4 years later.
Yep.
And this could be, once again, the tech could have done the right thing, or thought he was doing the right thing, and really had it backed up. The material could have failed, which is highly unlikely in this case with seam sealer. It's usually an application issue of either not putting it in or covering all the areas. I see a lot of a lot of the shops I deal with the German companies, and they have the sprayable seam sealer a lot of spots. What they've been doing is actually brushing on a thin bead of seam sealer, making sure it gets into that flange, and then spraying the seam sealer over the top of it to really make sure I shoved enough of that seam sealer in the gaps or the recessed areas. Now it's really sealed, and now I'm spraying this over the top, not only for appearance but also for seam sealing. But I made sure I got in there really, really tight with this stuff. Even sometimes I see some of the techs using little small plastic applicators to kind of like they're putting body filler on in a way. Then they spray over the top. So they made sure they really sealed that joint good.
Or a rubber glove with your finger even,
Yeah.
just to shove it in.
One of the things to look at here, it's a 4-year-old repair. And I hear from a lot of guys, well, we use etch primer all the time. We never have a problem. We never have a comeback. Well, they never see it, right? It's 4 years later. It's 4 years later. They don't see that, you know.
And the average. Do you really have technicians telling you we use etch primer all the time?
Oh yeah,
absolutely. Well, I was in a shop last week. The last shop I was in said exactly that.
Right. And the average car is on the road about 11 years.
They were using self-etch weld-through primer as the primer under their seam sealer.
Yeah, but my sales rep guy told me that. Okay.
Okay.
Well, we want your opinion on this. No, I'm done with you. I'm leaving. What do you mean leaving? You're not listening to me, so I'm going to leave. Talk to your salesman. Ask him.
Well, I think the two biggest takeaways here is what Shawn said. This is a 4-year-old car. It's going to come back to you, and you're liable, and you're on it as a shop. And you're
that
not
tech probably left the shop, too.
Yeah, the tech's gone, right? He's somewhere else.
Fixing it.
But you're not only now putting another quarter panel on, but like Mark said, you're putting the supportive panels on for the flanges because, rust is cancer, and once it's there, it's there.
We'll see another picture with similar results in a roof ditch.
So that car's on the road 11 years. But the other thing is, most post-repair inspections don't start because a customer said, I think they sectioned my quarter panel on wrong. They come in because I have rust in places I didn't have rust before that you worked on, and now I'm worried. So I might have done the best job. Shawn, you like to say this a lot. You were a tech for a long time before you were at 3M doing what you're doing now, and you took pride in your work. Why wouldn't I want to preserve that as a technician and use the corrosion protection properties?
Great craftsmen out there that do good work. Why wouldn't you want to preserve that work? Why would you want a year later for it to start falling apart when you did such nice work in the beginning?
Exactly.
And oftentimes I'll get involved in a case because they went and got an oil change.
Sure.
And the lube tech looks up and goes, you're rusting all the way on your right side, but not your left, and game on.
Yeah, exactly. So let's dive in. So obviously from the pictures, it happens. You guys are telling me etch every day, which is hurting my soul.
Yep.
My feelings are hurt now, I'm not gonna lie. Here are the 5 categories we're gonna cover today when we talk about corrosion protection and rust proofing. So we're gonna cover the primers, the seam sealers, adhesives, undercoatings, and rust proofing / really, we know this is cavity wax. I thought cavity wax was going to be the thing that hurt my feelings today. I was going to make that my soapbox, but apparently I'm going to get on the soapbox a little earlier today. I thought I had time. So let's talk about primers. There are really 4-ish, 5-ish types of primers that we're finding in the body shop department. So we have our Weld-through, which kind of misnamed, right? We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yep.
We have our 2Ks, which may be epoxies or urethanes. And then we have the contraband list.
Well, and I almost wanted to put a big circle with an extra, and on the bottom, because the etch and 1K do not belong in the body department ever in any form.
But why do they sell it? Well, because some other idiotic company sold it, so everyone else has got to jump on that bandwagon. So it really is with companies. A lot of times, it's one guy jumps off the bridge, and everyone else has to follow.
Yeah.
It's like when your mom just said to you, well, if he jumped off the bridge, would you follow him? No. Okay, well, logic seems to go away from multi-billion-dollar companies, because if somebody builds one of these stupid things, everyone else has to build it and relabel it and put their own, their own little kick on it.
Every product can have a use, and that use may fall into my refinish department.
Right.
Those two really never have a purpose in the body technician's hands at all. So as a shop owner or a shop foreman, if you're watching this, if you have a technician that has those two in his box, you have a problem. If you have technicians requesting those two be ordered for the body department, you have a problem.
What are you using it for? Right?
So if you thought you didn't have a corrosion protection problem in your facility, just those two things alone can sometimes be great indicators.
If you have a restoration shop and you're ordering that stuff.
No.
No.
It actually just really doesn't belong.
It doesn't belong. Yeah, don't use it for body repair.
Yeah.
Can't wait for the phone calls from my office.
I won't get them.
From the
I bet I get more.
You
than
get
you
more.
do.
Yeah, no, you'll get the ones about me
I'm gonna
because
get
they all
more.
cry to you like you're my mom or something.
But it's just the way it is. So it's a great way to do it. But let's start with the weld-throughs. We get a lot of questions on it. We have a lot of arguments on this still. It's kind of the one question that I think everybody knows if they post it online, it's going to make all of us go, I cannot believe we're answering this
Well, all
again.
three of
It's
us will respond.
It's
very
like
quickly.
Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
We get the question a lot. Where do you find the answers for corrosion protection? What the OEMs have, what isn't there? So let's talk about this as we dive into weld-through. The fastest thing, and I say this every show, I start every day on the iCar RTS portal looking for the news stories, what's the latest article Jason and the team and all them up there are going to put out for us that kind of centralizes an issue. But information, I can't think of anything I need that I can't start here to find it. So when you go onto the repairability technical support portal from iCar, which is rts.icar.com, in the search engine search box at the top, all you got to do is search corrosion protection. And you're going to get returns on everything iCar has on corrosion protection.
By the way, those are all links to each manufacturer's own preferences as far as corrosion protection.
Yeah, there are several articles for each one. Honda, Ford, General Motors, Toyota. I mean,
There's
you
a
can
lot
go
of
through
commonality there, but there are some unique differences depending on the company, and all the links are right there.
Yeah. Here is the repair technical information matrix. So you've seen us post this on Collision Hub's social media channels frequently. I recommend that every estimator and every technician have this printed, laminated, and on their desk or in their toolbox for 100% reference at all times. But there are two categories on this matrix that pay attention for today. One is corrosion protection materials. And so you can, what's available from the OEM when it comes to their materials, their mix, and their recommendations. If you've got a green in that box, it says yes, that OEM has material information, position statements available for you. And then there is a separate column just for weld-through primer. So if you want to know whether that OEM is a yes or a no on weld-through primer and what particular, maybe it's an interest, for instance, some of the Germans have their primer. That's the one you got to use. Well, that information is available as well. So I'm going to play devil's advocate here, guys. Why do some OEMs say yes to weld-through primer and some say no?
Let's take it right to Shawn.
Well, Chrysler is the main one that everybody thinks about, right?
Yeah.
And
Now,
they
Honda
say
too, though.
Right, and they say no weld-through primer. They've been saying that for a number of years. But everybody fails to read the rest of the statement that says they really want you to spot weld whenever possible, and they want either an adhesive or a sealer in the joint. So they're not just saying leave it bare metal in the joint. They want an adhesive or sealer in the joint spot welded through. So when they say no weld-through primer, it really is saying there's another alternative.
Right. Can I MIG weld through those alternative methods?
No. When you're MIG welding, your only option is a weld-through primer or or a coating. So if somebody wasn't going to put weld-through primer in the joint, it's possible they could put an epoxy primer in the joint and seal the joint or clean that out of the weld zone. But yeah, most cases you're going to be spot welding if you're repairing a Chrysler vehicle correctly anyway.
And I just want to be clear for the audience here is that, and that's Chrysler you're talking about there, but not Honda.
Right.
Honda's not saying put a sealer in there and squeeze type. So it's really, you got to go back. This is just a reference to start with. Go to the OEM. They're going to tell you what to do. But at least it'll tell you.
And you're going to want to follow those. Now,
and by the way, we're going to talk about, even if you don't have weld-through primer in the joint, what a great job cavity wax does.
Exactly.
So keep that in your mind till later as well.
Yeah.
We're going.
Yeah, it's a process.
Yep.
So when an OEM does say use weld-through primer, they're pretty specific on, like with some of the Germans, you will use this brand, this make, this model, you will order it from us, you will do it this way.
Right.
The ones that don't have that even still have a position on what the type of product should be. So this is specifically from Toyota.
Correct.
This is an article that was in the Toyota magazine.
And this is like 3 years old?
Yeah.
At least, yeah.
At
Yeah.
least.
So this is not new.
But there's been other articles since then,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Now,
From other
every
companies.
time that I look at an OEM and they do specify, they don't specify brand, obviously, in that way, but they do say that you need a zinc versus a copper. Shawn, without a science lesson, which I would fail, what's the reason for that?
Well, there is science to it for sure, and it's all about the electrical conductivity of different metals. And to put it in a nutshell, zinc is much more active electrically than steel, so it will donate electrons to the steel to prevent corrosion. On the other hand, copper is less active than steel, so copper will actually rob electrons away from the steel, which is what causes the corrosion. The one thing to look out for, though, is that all these products, if you pull tech data sheets, all have different degrees of the amount of zinc, the amount of copper. It's really hard to get a handle on really what's in some of these products. Some of them are copper colored that have very little copper in them. So it's a very tricky thing to navigate, but most of the manufacturers recommend zinc if they make a specific recommendation. Some call it zinc.
But none recommend copper.
I haven't seen one that recommends copper yet.
That's the big difference.
And they call it zinc. Some call it zinc dust. There's a number of things
zinc,
that they.
There's always a zinc name to it.
Right.
That you'll see, and you do have to realize using a copper weld-through primer in today's collision repair facilities with aluminum outer panels. I'm not even talking aluminum, certified shop. I'm talking where you have aluminum fenders or doors you're working on, and you're working on also a steel panel with copper. Copper breaks down to protect aluminum. Aluminum breaks down to protect steel. You could have one big galvanic corrosion issue with this vehicle by not even realizing the chemicals you're mixing together.
Yeah.
That sounds like a liability soup to me.
There's physics there. You can't deny the physics.
Yeah,
if you read any corrosion materials management company, they will describe that, and there's science to it.
And let's just go back to the beginning. When they're dunking the cars in those pools, what are they dunking it in?
Zinc phosphate.
It's zinc.
Zinc phosphate, yeah. It's electrically being statically charged.
I've got another one for you too. Is for example, self-piercing rivets. They're coated with zinc.
Yep.
They're coated with zinc for a reason, because it's a good corrosion protector.
So we know that sometimes, just like weld-through primer isn't necessarily named, it might be called weld-around primer. Sometimes people name their products that doesn't necessarily might accurately reflect what's in the can.
Right.
So if I'm a shop owner or a shop foreman right now and I'm wondering, oh my God, what's in my shop today? Is it just a matter of pulling the TDS sheets and kind of looking at the numbers? And
Yeah, you really got to do that. You gotta
okay.
I mean, I personally wouldn't want to drink a soda that's named lacquer thinners or gasoline. There is something to advertising. You should really have what the name is, and I guess maybe too many people want to catch catchphrases or whatever, the new catchphrase thing, which could be a lie if it doesn't contain that product in there. Yeah. Right. So I don't know why somebody would name something that's not what it is.
Well, it's pretty easy to Google a tech data sheet.
Yeah.
So if you have a weld-through primer and you're not sure what's in it, Google the tech data sheet. Now, they usually don't give you specific amounts, but they give you a range of how much copper, zinc, or whatever.
Right. And the other thing that I get from techs all the time is, well, I hate weld-through primer because when I weld through it, it pops and it snorts and all that. And I say you shouldn't be welding through weld-through primer. They should call it weld-around primer.
The big thing with that, with the weld-through primers is that these techs are showing you they don't know how to weld. They learn from somebody in the shop.
Yep.
You got to take a flat-bottom drilled bit, a capted little small media blaster, a sand blaster, and then a stainless steel wire brush. And once again, with the stainless steel wire brushes, here comes more lies to this industry. Take a magnet when you're at the welding place and put a magnet to the stainless steel brush. If it sticks, it's not stainless steel, okay? It means it's a ferrous type material. You need non-ferrous. You clean out that area. There should be it should be bare steel when you weld through that plug weld hole, or when you weld on that line joint for either an open butt joint, for a butt joint with backing, a fillet weld where you got one panel laid over the other, or even an offset weld, which is like a formed-in backing joint. You have to clean out that zinc coating before you weld, and that'll keep it clean, and it prevents a lot of issues with your weld.
So you're telling me I should use a magnet, not use an air blower?
To blow off your zinc coating.
All right, so let's go, because I think weld-through primer is one of the things that we do. Well, there's a lot we do wrong, but it's one of the things we do wrong the most in this industry. Shawn, walk us through kind of some of the comparisons and the stuff you brought us around weld-through primer.
Well, this is interesting because I did some high-resolution photography of your initial first strike of the arc when you pull the trigger with your MIG welder. So the picture on the left is showing bare steel, where you're welding the bare steel. And technicians, they know this instinctively. They know if it's completely clean, they pull that trigger. Basically, that first little globule of molten steel from the wire just jumps right onto the steel, and you can see you get good fusion all the way around it. So that's just the very first pull of the arc, and you can see you're off to a good start. Now, if you have coatings in the weld zone, like we have over here, first of all, you can see all the soot. Contamination, you're going to have contaminated porous welds. That's pretty obvious from the picture.
Which is a weaker weld.
Right, but now you can see that from the first pull, it didn't even jump onto the metal, it kind of just flew off, right? That's your spatter that you're looking at, right? So you didn't get any fusion. So now what happens is you spend so much more time trying to recover and make a good weld that you spend much more time in the weld zone. So you're going to get a hotter weld. So you get a poor quality weld, you get a hotter weld that destroys the metal, and you burn away all the coatings.
But I've been doing this 30 years.
I've been poorly welding for 30 years.
And it just burns out, doesn't it?
Yeah. I don't have a problem. I never had an issue.
You have little gas pockets in that weld nugget that are porous.
Yeah, and the bottom line, it comes down to what we can't see. And this industry is more and more about what we can't see than what we can see than ever before. And then let's go through it. Some great examples here, Shawn.
So yeah, it's the same thing here. So this is just showing the front side of completed welds with coatings. So this was bare steel, so you can see the heat effect zone around that weld nugget is very small. So that's a really good weld.
You can see consistent halos around each weld.
Now you've got a zinc weld-through primer in the zone that you're welding through, okay, over the top of. And you can see, again, because you get a poor first initial strike, that you've got to spend more time in the weld zone, so you're getting a larger heat effect zone.
And look at the inconsistency, even with the heat effect zone, you know, as you weld these together versus the other ones, which are welded very close together. This is being welded, and you can see the resonation as it goes on. The area gets bigger and bigger because that heat's carrying more because you have another product in there that's being conductive of the heat.
Right, and you're starting to see the weld nuggets aren't as nice, they're taller, there's not as good penetration, and the one that's pictured has a little porous crater in it. And then this is through the copper weld-through primer, where now you can see the heat effect zone is much larger. Yeah.
Notice the two on the right there.
Right.
Those are the DM ones,
they're
right?
Connected, yeah.
But look at the first one he started. I mean, you can see that the first one, even that's bigger footprint than the others, and the halos just get tremendous from there. You know.
So that would definitely be a poor weld. We would have overheated our substrates. We would have caused probably damage to the connection panels as well.
But you have a bigger dome, and the bigger dome now, when you go to dress the weld or grind it, you know, to get it flatter, now you create more heat being in there because now you have to grind it. When if you welded it properly, you may not have had to have dressed it or grind it because it's not going to be visually seen. And this becomes that whole issue with just adding more heat being applied.
Well, we want to sell roll-out grinding discs, but not because of this.
Well, speaking of roll-out grinding disc, so let's talk about what's the proper way to use weld-through primer, Shawn?
Well, if you need to use weld-through primer, and if it's recommended, you want to clean it out of the weld zone. So when you overlap your top panel and you can see the weld-through primer in the bottom of the punched hole, that has to come out of there. That's got to be cleaned out. And you know, a lot of technicians, I'll give them credit, have some really good inventive ways of doing that. You see flat bottom drill bits. I've seen guys just use a scratch awl. You see a lot of different ways that guys do it, little spot blasters. But this video here shows a very easy way to do that with a 1-inch bristle disc.
Right.
So
but it needs to be a clean area to weld on.
Right, and weld-through primer comes off pretty easy, we discovered.
Well, you got to realize, right, before you're ready to put, your weld-through primers on there, you want to clean the panel after you dress it, the remaining panel on the vehicle. You want to clean it off with, some sort of wax and grease remover. That's going to be clean. Make sure you dry it up really, really good. Don't use any other type of products. I've heard guys use brake cleaner. You could die from that gas that comes off of that. You clean the back side of the panel. You clean the front side of the panel. Make sure you have gloves on. You don't want your greasy hands touching it because the grease will also cause an issue. Now you spray your weld-through primers on there, and we're going to speak about that in a minute, about applying weld-through primer.
How do we apply it?
And when you're done with that, you put the panels together, like Shawn said, you got to clean that area. It has to be super, super clean for a weld to go through properly. You're not going to burn through stuff. And you got to remember, you got to clean the back side of the existing panel inside the car when you weld it, because one, you don't want to breathe that gas in or have a fire catch. You have to clean that area. You got to paint it anyway. Well, you're supposed to paint it. We saw people who don't paint it. And you got to make sure everything's clean. It's got to be like you're in an operating room. You can't have all this grease and all this other stuff in the area.
Right.
That's and by the way, primer or weld-through primer is basically a zinc dust that's mixed with some solvents so that you can spray it on the panel. And when the solvents go away, you basically have powder covering the surface. So there's no binders in there.
Yep.
Right.
Nothing's going to stick to it.
You can almost wipe it with your finger and it'll actually start coming off.
And that's why. So every shop owner that's watching this, or every production manager, even every technician, spray some Weld-through primer on something, let it dry, and then walk up with your fingernail and scratch it right back off. It's not paint.
Or after it's cured, dried up, flashed off, put some tape on it, pull the tape
right
off,
off.
and see what happens.
Right off, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It'll come off nice and neat on the
So
tape.
nothing else would ever want to go on top of that.
No.
Right.
Yeah, no, never.
And by the way, it's okay to put it on with a brush or a dauber. I used to take it, if I had to do that, I would spray it into the cap of the product, and I'd take a dauber and I would put it on with a dauber.
Because you waste a lot
So
of
you don't
time
get it
masking
everywhere.
it off.
Yeah.
You know, masking off the area and stuff like that.
Well, if you're getting paid for it, I mean, so if you're billing adequately on your
Well, yeah,
estimating,
even
and
if you're
you're
getting paid for it, I
Yeah.
still think it's a big waste of time. It's faster and
Spray it in
easier.
the cap with a cotton dauber.
Spray it in the cap and just, touch it up with a little brush. That's it, or a dauber. Some sort of cotton dauber.
So why do they sell it in a spray can then?
Because everybody else does.
Oh,
One person came out with it. That's the problem. One person comes out, I got this stuff in a spray can. Well, what happened to the stuff now? Oh, no, Shawn, we got to go make this now. Mark, we got to go make this now. We got to have a can. If someone came out with a suit to wear for it, everyone else would come out with a special suit to wear for it.
Well, I was being a little facetious
could
because
design
you
a suit.
do spray it on out of a spray can. You did get a more uniform film thickness, so that's really the main reason.
Well, there's an appropriate way to spray it,
Right.
and that's
Yes.
masking it off, or cardboard or something. But the problem that we see is that they spray it, and they spray it all over unsanded paint, and then the painter has to go in the paint department and grab their lacquer thinner, wax and grease, and wipe it back off. And
Right.
Well,
By
a
the
lot of-
way, read the can, because
Says
a lot of
always sticks
guys
to bare metal.
I've had some discussions with, they like a certain primer, and I say read the can, and then they see that you put one coat on, wait 30 minutes, and
Yep.
put another coat on,
Right.
and nobody's doing that.
Yep.
No, I'm covering it like I'm spraying with Krylon spray paint or something. I'm doing a wall or something. And you got to realize also the spray pattern on there is pretty wide.
Yep.
Versus the panel you're actually spraying is probably, the width of my thumb's probably thicker than what
Yep.
you're actually spraying on the car. So that's another issue with the spray pattern that you have to watch out
12-inch fan pattern going into a 1-inch area.
Yeah.
Yep, perfect.
So let's talk about epoxies versus the 1Ks, or even the urethanes, or a 2K product versus a 1K product, in a way here.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting. This was a sample that somebody sent back to me and said, hey, the seam sealer failed. So this is up in a roof ditch on a van. So I cut this little section out of there. So I just easily pulled off the remaining seam sealer, and guess what I found on the back side of it? Primer, right? So the primer failed. The primer cohesively failed, peeled off the material. I took some solvent and wiped off the primer, and of course with the solvent it came right off. I know it's a 1K primer.
Yep.
So you don't ever want to use 1K primers under seam sealer, especially in an area like this. So what happened is it separated just at the edge of the seam, the interface between the metal panel and the seam sealer. Water got down in there, moisture, and not only did it destroy the roof, but it destroyed the panels underneath. So this ended up being a very expensive claim to the shop. Yep. They tried to save a little bit of time by cheating with a 1K primer, and it cost them a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why we say it's contraband.
Yeah.
It does not belong in the body department.
Yeah. I mean, just take it and just throw it away today. I mean,
A lot of shops they pulled off their paint mixing bank. It's like it's the right color. It's OEM e-coat color, and no, it doesn't belong under seam sealer.
Not
Yeah,
at all.
exactly. I think sometimes we get caught up in that color matching issue. I know we've gotten a couple questions on the website. How do I match the same color as what the OE had on there before? And we're not. In some cases I can't do exactly what the OE did, and so I'm remanufacturing in that scenario.
Yep.
Etch primer. Love the picture, Larry.
This guy took his Sunday newspaper and masked off his whole car with the nice blue tape. That's not supposed to stick that hard, so that I can use it on household type stuff.
It's available at Home Depot.
It's available at Home Depot,
Yeah.
and he's got his 2 shake cans that he's all happy with.
Ready to go.
He's blowing off the dust with his bare hand. Wiping and blowing. I'm sure he doesn't have an oil water separator, but that doesn't matter. All the oil in his hand's going on there anyway, so I'm surprised he's not blowing off going.
Yeah. That doesn't work.
No, because you got spittle that comes out.
But don't worry, we're going to see that car next week at SEMA. There's a restoration.
It's winning the Riddler Award.
My phone call list is going up. Thanks, guys. It's getting bigger right now. But etch is one of those things where it has a purpose in the paint department, and they make it and sell it for a reason. but I can't think of a single reason at all this should be in the body shop, in the technician's hands.
Well, there's a good rule of thumb too, is that your primers, you shouldn't seal over any primer that your paint maker does not recommend that you can spray color over.
Right.
You can't spray color directly over etch primer. It does not stick well, right? You can't spray, they will not warranty color over a 1K primer.
Right.
So that's a good rule of thumb to use. Hey, what does my paint maker want me to spray our color over the top of? That's a good primer for seam sealing over.
Yeah.
It's not that hard.
And then I'm gonna just make a shout out to shop owners, production managers, and painters right now. So look on your mixing bank, because you probably have your etch prime that is just right on your mixing bank, and that's your primer, that's what you use. And you probably either don't have epoxy in your shop, or you have, it's there, but nobody knows how to use it. Where we'd want to use it is...
Or they're not mixing it. You know, sometimes your primer surface or your primer seal is the same, you know, binding color, and then depending on what additive or reducer or whatever mix you do will change how it reacts on the panel. You know, from a wet-on-wet to a primer surfacer to an epoxy primer. And that's important that they read that through. But once again, that's reading the manual.
There's what's on the mixing bank, but I think when it comes to body technicians, there's too many things in aerosol right now that just don't belong in aerosol. And there's a lot of people, I want to say manufacturing them, but promoting them as easy, and you can put it on a cart and your technicians can share them.
Because everybody wants to do a car repair like it's a friggin' oil change.
10 minutes?
10 minutes. They don't want to read anything. You know, they're made up with ridiculous amount of times to try and get a car done. So companies produce these things. The tech thinks it's okay because it sounds like a good line of BS, and he uses it. It seems to work okay, and I've never had an issue with it. But the fact is that look at who's speaking about it. The salesman, the company that makes it. Where do you see an article from iCar on Collision? Have I written an article about it? You got to think these
technical people.
Yeah, why wouldn't Larry write an article about it? He writes an article about every other stupid thing that we put on Facebook, and he'll just write an article. The next month we talk about it 1 month, the next month it's out there. Or Collision Hub, we talk about something on Facebook, and all of a sudden they're running a show on it. Why aren't we talking about? Well, here we're talking about it now, but somebody will still doubt it.
Yeah, this is a technical business that is a hands-on, skilled trade business, and it shouldn't be easy.
But you know what gets skewed is time. Everybody wants it super fast, and then you have salespeople that throw things at you. You know, and they believe it.
Yeah,
they believe the sales pitch.
We've tried to market cycle time to collision repairs, and quite frankly, cycle time is the last thing I think about it. I get that you want to have so much throughput because every square foot is $1 and everything, but at the end of the day, it takes what it takes to fix the car. Cycle time is someone else's problem.
And then shops in the country have no management systems. Don't worry about cycle time.
And you know, with the advent of these reinspection companies, I'm telling you, this is going to come back to haunt a lot of shops because a lot of the things we're talking about are very cheap protection.
I will agree with you because I've met a lot of post-repair inspectors that aren't technical. I mean, let's be honest, they're not technicians. They don't know anything about repairs, but they sure can spot rust when they put on a borescope.
That's how bad it is.
Yeah, they put the borescope in and they go, I got rust, we're going to make some money today.
I heard Stevie Wonder's opening up a post-repair inspection company.
Both the materials and the time are cheap compared to what a comeback. Especially a large comeback is going to cost.
You're going to buy the car. I mean, once it's in that state, it's not a matter of let's just re-repair the quarter panel. You're going to buy the car.
These are so bad they're being bought back right away. The only time you really need a technical professional is when you have something that has to go to court or there's been a major injury.
Yeah, I would say that that the post-repair person looked at it, couldn't find rust or something blatantly obvious, and then now it's had to go to someone technical. One of you two are now looking at it scientifically.
We'll find it.
We got to prove it. They don't have to prove it. They don't have to show that it's not good. We need to prove it and prove scientifically. Why it's that way.
Because we're going to go into court and testify about it.
That's the big difference.
And one of the things that you just mentioned was borescope. And everybody has this idea that borescopes are super expensive. So I have an expensive one, but I also
for court.
I have an expensive one that it's got the big one and a video and all that. But I also have one that attaches to my phone that was, Sean, I showed it to you. It was $15.99 on Amazon.
Right.
Yeah, they were like 70 bucks, and now they're down to 15. Yeah,
it's $15. You just clip it into your phone. You can shoot video or pictures. And like in that first slide where we had that open butt joint with that rust, you would have been able to put that up in there. And see that, and that needs to become part of the process in the shop before the car goes.
That borescope in that area to look for your welds on the backside to make sure they're okay. Guess what? you can get some sort of wand in there to spray a primer and spray,
exactly.
Spray some sort of anti-corrosion compound. And keep this in mind. Remember, the self-etch primers that are out there, if you even think of, you ever sprayed them on the inside, you do know the self-etch it's
acid.
It's acid.
Yep.
It's eating the metal. That's why it used to always be said you only put it on the outside years ago. Now we realize we're not even supposed to use it, but guys were spraying on the inside. You were actually causing more rot because the acid etch, now once you seal over the top of it with either an anti-corrosion compound or some sort of epoxy primer, now you lock it in there. Now it has to breathe. So
it's
what is
like
it
putting
do?
the cover on
it's
your casserole.
Eat its way out the other side. So I mean, that's been, this is a chemical issue. This is a problem with this industry nowadays. Not only do estimators have to be like somewhat, para-engineers, painters have to be like para-chemists,
right.
and frame techs, body techs have to be like para-chemists and
structural engineers.
And superheroes. Body techs have to be superheroes.
I'm just para-engineers and
Yeah.
almost like a para-physics major to understand all this stuff. I mean, there's a lot of information that goes out there now. These isn't your daddy's Oldsmobile, is a true statement.
By the way, Mark, back to the boroscope, we know that the inspection companies have boroscopes, so why wouldn't you have the same tools that they're going to inspect your car with?
And
then to be clear about this, we're not trying to figure out, can we pass a post-repair inspection? The real thing is, let's fix the car right.
Right, exactly.
And we'll
quality repair.
Yeah.
So let's talk about seam sealers. So first of all, everything that we do in the collision repair when it comes to corrosion protection is a process, right? I got to have a good base, and then I have my seam sealers, and then I have my paint, and then so it's kind of this process. And first of all, it doesn't matter what seam sealer I select if I have not properly prepared that surface.
Right.
John, talk a little bit about that for me.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about that towards the end here as well, where we'll show what you can and cannot apply it over. But the right surface, the right primer, properly prepared usually means scuffed and cleaned, right?
Right.
So yeah, if you don't have a good foundation or a good base, well, everything on top of it is going to fail.
So what are my types of seam sealer? What's available to me in the market right now?
Well, as our company 3M, we have, I don't know, I haven't added it up, but probably like 30 different seam sealers at least, right? Yeah. But we'll see coming up here, we can really narrow that down. So a lot of the seam sealers, we have the direct-to-metals now. We have the 2 parts, where we have a chemical cure. And then we have the older technology 1-part urethanes or MSP seam sealers that are actually very high-quality products. Mm-hmm. They're kind of forgotten a little bit, but they have a lot of advantages over some of the 2 parts. So there's a number of things, and I see up now is the bare metal seam sealer. And actually, Mark had some pictures there. If you back up to the bare metal.
Let me just give the story on this.
Yeah,
this is a vehicle that was repaired, and this is what it looked like here on the top left. And how this was fixed at a shop. They were trying to do everything they could to duplicate the big gloppy Audi look. That's what they were trying to do, direct to metal. And how this got discovered was it got hit again, and it had a scratch in the bumper. They RNI'd the bumper, and they saw the lower left picture. That is where they didn't actually join up the seam sealer in the 2, and then the top right. So talk about the top right picture there, Shawn.
Well, yeah. So everybody sells a bare metal seam sealer now, and they're a great product. They have their place. However, they're only as good as the coatings that are applied to the top, right? We always like we call it the belt and suspender approach, where you have a primer underneath and then you have a seam sealer over the top. So you have both things, and if one fails, the other is still there. Well, here you're flying without a net, right?
Yep.
So there's nothing underneath there to protect it. And what happens is, from the picture, you can see that especially with a bead with a tall profile, like you're seeing there, is that you have a shadow side of the bead. And a lot of painters will only paint from one direction, and probably because there's something in the way from the other direction, so they paint from one direction, which leaves, the primer just kind of goes over and leaves a shadow on the back side where there's either no coating or very thin coatings. And that's where the corrosion starts,
Right.
And that's exactly what happened here.
Yeah, so in
you
this
have
case,
to paint from both directions and be very thorough with your coatings.
So in this case, what happened to the shop was the shop got to pay another shop to put a new rear body panel on the car.
That probably they went ahead and followed Audi and put primer down, then put the seam sealer on top of a cured, scuffed, abraded type primer.
Yep.
But that's a great point, Shawn. I think the body department and the paint department have to have conversations about those issues. Because I mean, if I'm painting a rear body panel, this is my motion, right? I don't know if how many
Up and
painters are
down
going to
and
go
around.
here and then go here.
Well, think about a wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't
can I get up and under and in?
if you don't have the tire off the vehicle, how would you even be able to get in and get that very back edge of a quarter panel?
Yeah. Oh,
Never gets there.
and then you've got your bare metal and then sprayables that are available.
Right, sprayable seam sealers as well. Just make sure if it's a sprayable seam sealer that it can go direct to metal if that's what you're doing.
Right.
And by the way, again, it all depends on the coating thickness and whether you have thorough coverage. So it may require more than one coat to get adequate coverage.
Right.
If you look at a sprayed seam sealer, you can see little spots of bare metal in between there in a lot of cases. So it may need to be primed. I would personally prime under it.
Well, say it's the suspenders and belt
Correct.
thing.
And you got to
just
keep
one
in
more
mind
level.
too, any one of these sprayables or any type of pumpable, either it being pneumatic or electric or just regular hand manual type pump, you got to practice at least to some portion of a bead on there, especially with the sprayable seam sealers through some sort of atomization where you have to practice what kind of bead you're going to have. Do I have to move a certain way, half circle, little round circles, jitter back and forth to get that same duplication? Sometimes I got to put out masking tape. This is all stuff that you have to add, to the damage report when you're writing it up, because look, I have to do this stuff.
So there's corrosion protection, but there's also the cosmetic side of seam
Well, there's a
sealer.
bunch of you got to realize corrosion protection is usually something that dries. Rust proofing is usually something that doesn't dry. But then you have assistance or secondary, tertiary protection things. So you got your corrosion protection of your primer down, but you also have underneath the primer is what? Most of the area has the factory electro deposition primer that's already there on the panels, but then you have to put a seam sealer to also assist in preventing anything from getting into gaps that causes more corrosion. So in a way, seam sealer is a corrosion protection or a corrosion protection assistant. It's like a helper.
It's part of the process, for sure.
But one of the points that you guys brought up earlier is when we have these situations where we have these textured applications, a lot of times you're going to make a really tight coat. Maybe with even your finger, you're going to make sure that you've got that seam sealer well into that joint, well around. Now I'm going to come back and I'm going to worry about matching and doing my buildup and all of that. We don't just go straight to buildup.
Right. We call it form and function. So you've got the function is the primary thing, right? That's the most important. So the function is to seal that joint. So it's really a good idea to go and first seal the joint and make sure it's all sealed up. Then you can go over the top of it with your patterns that we see here, different types of patterns, and selecting the right type of seam sealer, whether it's going to hold brush marks or comb marks or whatever, or something that you want to flow.
That takes some practice.
It does take practice.
But if I've got
the edge of a cardboard box, to get the seam, practice on there, or even a spray pattern on a cardboard box, because you can see almost sometimes you hold the gun at a certain angle, you can get that sprayable seam sealer / rocker fade away if you want, because if I angle the gun like this and spray back and forth, I'll get that little fade away, or I'm going to flip tape backwards and use that as a protection, but I got to make sure it's straight enough versus a hard line type of thing.
Yeah, but if I'm doing something as simple like in this picture, like a door, I'm not going to go directly to that heavy build. I'm going to grab my tip and I'm not going to go directly to that step. And we see it day after day after day and shop after shop.
Jam it in the edge first of that flange, that hem flange, and even with this, if you're using a hand held one, every so often, every time you go to rack it, blop, you're gonna want to put a blop. Even if you mask off the edges, you're still gonna have a higher spot there. If you're using a pneumatic gun, you're still gonna have to get the right pace and air pressure to get that done. So no matter what, you're gonna have to make a practice bead.
It's almost like a test panel when you're painting. You gotta spray out the color.
I will say that if you do this correctly, and you use equipment where you have a nozzle where it can really force the material in there, a lot of times you can do it in one pass, as long as it's forcing that material down into that seam.
Yep. We just got to be careful.
Right.
Now, Shawn, I love this slide, and I want to kind of talk about it because we go into shops, the three of us, and you do too, when you're doing conversions or training or whatever, and we sometimes find 30 different products in the shop, and all 30 are being used incorrectly. But I love what you did here. So outside of any specific OEM recommendations for their part branded product, these three seam sealers will take care of, what you're saying is about 95% of what I want to see in a shop.
Right. Yeah, we can really condense that list down. Like I said, we have about 30 or whatever different seam sealers, and it gets a little confusing. So we tried to narrow it down to just a few, and we consider the two in the middle as the same thing. They're both heavy-bodied, except one is direct to metal, one is not. So you would choose which one you like there. But the left is a flowable, so that you can do for all the seams where you want a flowable seam sealer. And then the two in the middle are heavy-bodied. And then the ones on the right, like I said, are pretty much underutilized and neglected, where they're the one-part urethanes or modified silane polymers or MSPs. And those are really good against corrosion direct to bare metal. Some guys get confused whether they can do that or not. They can also be spot welded through, by the way, if it's recommended. So really, you can narrow it down to those three products. Will do about 95% of what you want to do. Now, if you need like a really super runny flowable, then we have another product for that. Or if you want the factory match, we have one for that. But really, to stock your shelf with just a few things and narrow down that product list, we can really narrow it down. And then the one on the left, our flowable, that's also a plastic repair material. So you're really narrowing those SKUs down, which the parts managers or the shops really appreciate.
Well, and it makes training of the technicians so much
easier
that's
too.
it.
It takes a lot of confusion out when you can narrow it down to just a few
And if you got your chart there, you know what's going on. But just do us all one favor, everybody out there. Never have both of these in the shop. Pick one or the other.
Yep.
Don't have both, because someone's going to grab the wrong product and use the wrong product in the wrong way, and then they're going to call in Shawn as a technical expert. He's going to come in, well, you used the 8310, direct to metal, and you have nothing but primer in here. You used it the wrong way. It's not going to seal. We can't guarantee it. You didn't read the instructions. Because that's what happens. A lot of times people have that issue. Look, people get conditioned into things. I know every place I go into, I order a coffee. Let me have 2 creams, no sugar. You want sugar with that, or I get sugar? Because people are so used to saying, when you work at a deli or something, or Dunkin' Donuts, everyone wants sugar. So when I say no sugar, they're like, sugar? It's like, what part of NO didn't you understand? The N or the O? But this is what happens with technicians. They're in a rush. They grab, and
whatever
they're
it
very
is.
similar. Maybe make them 2 different colors. Or
They look
something.
about the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
So the thing here is that we brought up is that it's great when you limit your number of products, because it helps you train technicians not only in when to use what where, but how to use it and how to make sure you're using it properly. Probably a good idea as a shop to sit down and talk with your technicians about what's our procedure going to be for rear body panels and quarter panels, and how are we going to address it, and then make sure that you have that procedure together.
And one other thing that we meant to touch on earlier was we have to rethink from a production standpoint. If we're not going to use a bomb can of self-etching primer, we're going to put some epoxy or a 2-part, but we can't just do that and it doesn't dry in 10 minutes. So we might be thinking about, man, I got to get that primer tonight so we can seam seal tomorrow, which means we got to be rethinking for the proper level.
And sometimes it seems like a big deal to change that process, but normally if you change to allow for that, well, in just a short period of time, everyone gets used to it. It's not that big of a deal, but it's well worth it for the, compared to the alternative, having corroded parts.
All right, so we're running out of time, and we've still got a lot to cover here. So this is my it's my pet peeve. So I want to make sure that we kind of touch this and we talk about cavity wax. So we had a great discussion yesterday among us. Just honest, I'm just going to throw it out there. I can say it. I know a lot of you can't say it. As a body technician, you should be averaging a can a week per technician of cavity wax, and that's just standard everyday repairs, nothing special like I'm the heavy tech or whatever. A can a week. If you are not averaging a can a week, you are not repairing cars properly. There's no other way to really say it.
Pretty simple.
You have an exposure issue there. If you are a shop owner and a shop foreman and you are not ordering at least a can a week per technician of cavity wax, you have a problem and need to have something addressed. So, Shawn, tell us why cavity wax is so critical.
Well, it's probably, in my opinion, one of the most important steps as far as the corrosion protection goes, because a lot of cases we're in blind cavities, and really the area or application where it's most critical is for welded on panels. Any welded on panel, you have burnt the coatings away inside the flange, and you need to use cavity wax to allow it to creep in and protect those welded areas. Any welded area should have, and that's why you say you're going to use quite a bit, because if you're protecting any welded area, you're going to use quite a bit of cavity wax.
And that would include if I put a stud gun on a panel to pull out a dent. I'm now blowing in a ton of cavity wax.
If you hammer and dolly a quarter.
then I'm blowing in cavity wax inside the panel. Great picture here. To me, when I look at these pictures, I drill it down really simple. I'm going to live on the right. I'm going to die on the left. So you might have done everything right. You might have put the rail in perfectly. You might have welded the panel on right, and you didn't do that cavity wax step, and now my customer is in danger.
Yeah, this went through a salt spray chamber test here, and the one on the left, keep in mind, it's also galvanized. Right. And look at how aggressive that salt spray test is. It will, rust right through that metal. But if you look at the one on the right, that's protected with cavity wax, and it's probably 3 coats. It's very well protected. The only corrosion you see is what started to creep in from the outside. So very well protected.
Right. And this was really interesting that you brought it to us yesterday to discuss. So just kind of walk us through this real quick.
Right. So when we did this test, we took 2 small hat channels and welded them together. And we welded one side with squeeze type welding. We welded the other side with MIG welding. And as you can see, stark difference between the one on the left, which has basically nothing in there. And it's badly corroded. The interesting thing about the one on the right is this is a sample that we did not even use a weld-through primer on the flanges, just left the flanges bare metal. And you can see what an amazing job that cavity wax did of protecting against corrosion. That went through the same exact test in the same salt chamber as the one on the left. And it's pretty obvious difference.
Live on the right, die on the left.
That's
right.
Right.
So cavity wax wins the day. Now,
and by the way, that's a great statement, because a lot of guys think the whole corrosion thing is all about cosmetics. It's not. It's about safety. Yep. I mean, you start having badly corroded areas, it is not going to react the same way in collision.
Well, I can give you 42 million reasons why you'd want to use cavity wax.
Yeah. I mean,
don't do that right now, though.
No.
Yeah. But cavity wax is now easier than ever to apply, and not a 3M plug. I mean, I use 3M and I love it. You guys take care of me in so many amazing ways. But what you've done with the cans and the wand system is fantastic. I'm not having to go chase down the gun that has the 5 attachments that's laying in the corner that's covered in 10 tons of dirt that no one's used in a while.
Right. That's what we tried to do. We tried to remove all the roadblocks from using it because we know it's underutilized. And we asked technicians, hey, why don't you use it? Well, we have one gun that we have to share. I can't find the gun is broken, the nozzles are clogged, you can't find any wands. So we took all those roadblocks out. It's so simple. You attach a nozzle, you spray it into the cavity, and it's got a great misting pattern that's 360 and can fit into very narrow openings, even drain holes down on the bottom of a door. So removing all those roadblocks, that's where the technician should be using a can a week.
A little shout out to the California shop owners, which is, everybody in the rest of the country should take the lead on this, but a bar regulation is that to be a collision repair facility, you have to have a cavity wax wand in your shop. It's right in the bar regulations.
That's fantastic. So let's talk about all the places cavity wax goes. Since we know we're not, I've talked to some distributors and they're like, we sell 6 cans of cavity wax a year. And I'm like, holy smokes. Yep. So we know we're not using it right. Where are all the places that they go? Walk us through it, Larry.
Anywhere you do a repair, you want to get on the flanges, the seams, anywhere, because you could have disturbed some of the factory built-in corrosion, so you want to be able to spray this stuff in there and make sure it's in there. Your rocker panels, your dog legs, your quarter panels, recessed areas, edges where mating flanges are, door skin to door shell, you want to put that in there. Any type of pulling you did to a car, because if you hit the outside of a rail and you never touched the inside, you probably disturbed some of the material on the inside of the rail also.
The OE material.
The OE material, because once it was bent during the collision, and then when you re-bent it back into shape and you did some stress relieving, you should just spray the whole inside of the rail. It's not going to hurt anything by putting extra corrosion protection in there. So it's only going to be good for the repair, the longevity of the repair. It also covers your ass in case something happens. But this is where the misnomer comes in. Many people don't realize, well, it's only for repair. No. If I go out and I purchase a new fender, a door, a hood, a not a quarter panel, a bolt-on component, there's areas I have to put this material in, and I know the picture's a little small, but I got 2 brand new door shells here. I have to put corrosion protection, well, really rust proofing here, with a can like this, and I have to spray with a wand this edge in here all the way around, and I want to make sure I direct the edge to where the flanges meet up with each other and spray around here for water cascading. Look at the fender, and this is from Honda, right? This is Honda.
Fender.
they want you to spray around the wheel well opening, the bottom here where leaves always collect, and even this back area where you have usually that foam piece for sound deadening. But look at the deck lid and the hood panel. You have to get in here and spray around the hood hinges. So there's areas besides your structural portions, because all this stuff welds on, you're not bolting it on, but you know, all these other areas, even the fuel door hinge. All right, so you have to spray this stuff on those areas to prevent corrosion from getting in there. Also, a lot of times you see it sprayed, a lot of the German cars have this over the top of nuts, bolts, and screws. Why? Because you want this gooey stuff to get in between there to prevent rust from getting in there. They're trying to be preventive. Even on a new model, they're like, well, you know what the hell, it's always worked, we're going to spray and just leave it like that.
Yeah, exactly. So even on new parts, so it's not just cavity wax is not just for when I'm welding or repairing a panel. It's for hoods and fenders and doors and mirrors and hinges, and there's all kinds of places that this goes.
It's in the repair manual. Go to the OEM website and read in the repair manual.
Yeah. By the way, and then sometimes, you know, you get a door or a hood and there's no seam sealer on the part, and the reason why is they stamp the part and they put it on the car, it goes down the assembly line. You've seen some of the videos, they seam seal it in production. Well, it never got there.
Right.
So we got to do that. And that's not included.
It's not included yet. It can be a pain
Material and labor.
Especially if you're painted and then you realize, uh-oh, the other 3 doors have it. I don't have it on this door.
Well, and a side note, body techs, don't do this before you send it to paint. Your painter will kill you.
Yes, after it's done painting.
You know, by the way,
that's a really good point, Mark.
We never did mention either that in a lot of cases, this is not getting done. We already know that.
Right.
How many of those cases has it been charged for on the estimate?
Yep.
Well,
that's fraud.
That's a really good point.
Yep.
I mean, so Larry, you preach it all the time. This is exactly one of those situations why rekeying an insurer's estimate is a disaster waiting to happen.
Rekey.
You mean $3 is not enough for corrosion protection?
Yeah, you know, I don't care what. I mean, it could be 3, it could be 15, it could be 10, it could be 20. But when an insurer has a gross line on an estimate, or if you as a shop, and I hate to say it, are a little dumb enough to make that a one single line entry for you, and you just say corrosion protection $15. Congratulations, folks! You just agreed to do all of this for $15.
Listen, it's the same thing I said before. If a technician's, you know, putting corrosion protection, you know, with the weld-through primer and then trying to weld through it, then guess what? You really don't know how to weld. If you're rekeying estimates because it makes your job easier, you really don't know how to run your business. Right. And it's because you've been conditioned to think this way.
Well, I mean, what Mark said is it's a legal situation. You've rekeyed an estimate. You've accepted corrosion protection at $15. Folks, that means everything. That's your seam sealer. That's your cavity wax. That's your adhesives if they're there. You've agreed to do it, and if we re-inspect it and you haven't, well, now it's insurance fraud. So it's not just the liability of the repair.
It's not your fight. It's
charge.
a customer's fight. You know, let them argue with the insurance company what they want to pay for.
Let's touch briefly on adhesives, because technically it counts as a rust preventative, a corrosion protection issue. John?
Sure.
Only when the OEM recommends it, though.
Right.
Well, we're today looking at the role of adhesives in the corrosion protection realm, right? So really the role they play are, well, some of them have chemical corrosion inhibitors that prevent corrosion, but the main function of those is to really seal the joint. Anytime that we can seal that joint to prevent any moisture intrusion from that area, we're going to be better off. So whether it's a sealer sometimes or an adhesive in that joint, it really does play a corrosion protection role as well.
Yeah. And you got to really remember, when you use this stuff, you have to keep in mind that if it tells you you have to put it out on both flanges and then one more bead, 99.99% of the time it's a corrosion resistant material, because you have to spread it out like it's corrosion sprayed on protection.
That's a great point.
And the third line is usually for a bead. So if they just tell you just put one bead, then it doesn't have corrosion protection, and you usually have to put it over scuffed, cured, some sort of epoxy primer or even factory E-coat. So make sure you read the instructions, because it could really void the warranty and even make the product not work right.
So let's cover this really fast, real quick. We got a question coming in, and then we're going to get into undercoatings. From Brian, do you recommend a bare metal primer before cavity wax?
Okay, that's going to be OEM specific. Some of the OEMs will recommend doing that, some will not. And here's a reason iCar kind of changed their stance a little bit, is that oftentimes when you weld a panel, let's say you section a frame rail, and on the inside you get some burnt flaking paint. First of all, you really should clean the paint off of the inside for an inch or two, okay? So you don't get that flaking paint. But if you have that flaking paint and you spray epoxy primer in first, it goes onto the flaking paint and it flakes off and exposes that area. Where some of them have now changed their minds and said, look, you're better off just going straight in there with a cavity wax because it's gooey and sticky. Even if it did peel off in an area, those oils seep out and seep and creep into
Yeah,
those
keep creeping
exposed
in there.
areas. It's self-healing.
Yeah.
So some of the manufacturers may still recommend an epoxy primer, but a lot of them are getting away for that reason.
Off, like you said, clean the area as best you can, sand it back. That's the best way to do it, because then you could always spray a primer in there because you have nothing to burn.
Yep.
Okay? But yeah, follow what the manufacturer says.
Yeah.
See what they
Go to
say.
those links on the RTS and look it up.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk really quick about undercoatings. Now, to me, this is another contraband item for me in the shop. I don't think any technician at all should have in his possession undercoating, chip guard, or rot guard. I like to see that as something that you have to kind of go check out like a library book, and somebody needs to come and inspect your work and make sure that you're not using it as like a cover-all for all things bad in your repair, or applying it in an improper situation.
Or applying it to the wrong car. Some manufacturers don't want it.
Yeah, some manufacturers say don't undercoat, and then you put undercoating on.
Right.
You know, it's almost like in seam sealer, let's go back to that. Seam sealer is designed to seal seams. It's not designed to cover welds.
Right.
But how many techs just cover welds and don't seal the seams?
Right.
And you gotta realize some companies are using seam sealer, like, you know, a lot of the Volkswagen and Audis have like a sprayable seam sealer. It used to be what we used to call rocker schuts years ago. Now it's more like a sprayable seam sealer they want you to use. Yeah. That's a two-part product that's gonna cure, and they want you to cover it over the top, and that takes practice to get the right. And some companies have undercoating, but it's got to be a dryable undercoating. They don't want it to stay wet. Some companies have a wet type undercoating that still does moist around for, you know.
Right. And that's a good point too. You have to know these products.
Yep.
Some of them can be applied over directly over bare metal. Some cannot. Some of them will get hard that you can paint over, and some will not. Some of them are asphalt based, and you spray over the top of that, it'll just bleed right into your top finish. So know those products well, and a lot of them go on thicker. The thicker they go on, the more flash time, the more cure time you're going to need. So really follow the instructions, but know that if you're applying really thick layers of something, it's just going to take longer to cure.
And some of it's not even corrosion protection. Some of it is basically sound deadener.
Right. And don't use it on trunk floors. Buy sound deadening pads.
Yeah.
Don't spray sprayable seam sealer everywhere.
Yeah.
It looks horrible.
Inside of doors too.
Yeah.
Put a sound deadening pad there.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic. But for me, it's one of those things where if I ever see something go wrong, it usually starts with a big blob of undercoating, and you're like, I wonder what's under there.
Why is that there?
Yeah.
You know.
So as a shop owner or a shop foreman, I just don't see any reason why anyone should have this in the possession of their toolbox. This would be something I want you to come check out welders too. I'm not gonna lie. I have a couple rules. But this is something that you're gonna come check out, and you're gonna show me where you're gonna apply it. You know, show me. Let's go look at the car together, and then make sure that you're using it, like you said, appropriately. Am I applying it? Is it a direct to metal or not? And how much cure time?
And back to the beginning.
It can be abused.
The technician's ultimately liable for every repair they do.
Right.
Period.
Yeah, but some just still don't believe that. The shop covers me. Okay.
No,
all right.
We need to get somebody that gets crucified.
All right.
So Shawn, this is awesome.
Let's bring it all together. So if we take all the 5 things that we've talked about that's available to us, and I'm putting it together in a joint with an ideal situation, walk me through this, Shawn.
Right. Well, I kind of wanted to put something together that was on one page. Okay, every time I go into a shop, there's arguments between the technicians. Well, this guy says you can apply this over bare metal. This guy says you can't, or you can't put this in a enclosed area, whatever it is. So I said, I'm going to put it all in one thing here. So the picture is basically the ideal joint, right? The ideal joint configuration for anything that you repair. So starting with from the outside, first of all, the joint has to be sealed, right? So you have to have a seam sealer or something that's going to seal that joint.
Well, what if the factory didn't seam seal it to begin with?
Well,
you're still going to
it's different now seam seal it. That we've repaired it, and that's a great point.
You just start the factory stuff.
We've conditioned the technicians to only follow the way the manufacturer made it. Well, a lot of the manufacturers will condone that after that's been repaired, everything changes. So now we need to seal seams that maybe weren't, because we have to protect our MIG welds or spot welds.
So this is kind of called dunk it in a big vat of E-coat or seal it, either way.
Right. So on the outside, you've got a seam sealer. It's really 3 things. And then between the flanges, you should either have, if you're MIG welding, your only choice is a weld-through primer if it's recommended. If you're spot welding, now you can have an adhesive in there, you can have a 1-part urethane, you can have weld-through primer in there, or you can have OEM E-coat in there. So it depends on what you're doing and what the manufacturer recommends. But you have some options now that if you're spot welding, but you have to have something in that joint. And then thirdly, on the inside is your cavity wax. So that kind of just seals everything out. If you're doing those 3 things, those simple 3 things, the repair is probably going to outlast the vehicle. Okay, so the big thing here is the acceptable substrates. A lot of confusion on that. So I'll just go through it. So if you're using 2-part seam sealers, you can go over a 2K epoxy or 2K urethane primer. You can go over scuffed E-coat. A lot of people don't realize that. If it's intact E-coat, you can scuff it and seam seal directly over. You don't need to prime if you don't want to. And you can go over scuffed OEM paint if that situation arises. So you have a number of acceptable substrates that are fine. Then for bare metal seam sealer, you can go over all of the above, the same things I mentioned. You can put a bare metal seam sealer over primers and E-coats as well. And then also bare metal with a bare metal seam sealer. But here's where you do not want to apply seam sealer: over an etch primer, a 1K rattle can type primer, body filler, weld-through primer, burn paint, soot, rust, or unsound surfaces. And that sounds funny, but I see it all the time, where you see soot from the welds and a seam seal right over the top.
Right.
So really everything is on that one page right there that technicians are usually asking.
So that last bullet pretty much answers every question and every fight we've had online for weeks.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know, it's not just us saying that. You can ask your paint manufacturer and they'll tell you the same thing.
Well, and ICAR, the corrosion protection class, even the CRC, which was from the 80s, that's what it said.
Yeah.
Right.
In 1985.
Yeah. I'm not sure how we've misinterpreted it for the last 30 years, but apparently we've done a great job of that over the last 30 years.
And by the way, this has been posted online, so anybody can find that. And if, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where we talked earlier about, I think everybody should have laminated in their toolbox, the matrix. I think this should be laminated in everybody's toolbox and on every estimator's desk, because if I want my technician to do this as an estimator, well, it's my job to get him paid for it and to get the shop compensated for everything that's going to be involved in those materials.
On every corrosion protection cart if they have one.
Absolutely.
Yep.
On that side of the cabinet.
A corrosion protection
That's
cart.
how we do it.
I like it. I think I want to make one now. So let's talk about the big rocks. So the takeaway from this. So we covered a lot of information. We talked about a little bit of the myths and the misnomers and the misuses and everything we see out there. But first off, I love this. I heard Michael Bradshaw from K&M Collision on an SCRS. So there's a great SCRS YouTube series on corrosion protection and welding and some other things. But I heard him say this: it's a process, not a line entry, and that is just really stuck with me for forever. And it's so true, and we see it.
The stuff you're looking at on this particular page here, if you're replacing a quarter panel or a rear body panel, you're probably looking in the area of anywhere between, I'll give you a pretty decent range, a low end of probably about $300 worth of material and labor. And materials, you know, such as, you know, not only the products you're putting on, but your masking tape, your paper, sanding paper and stuff like that, discs, all the way up to probably about $500.
Yep.
That has to be done on the car that many shops are doing, and you're not getting compensated for it. And you know,
No, they're getting $15, Larry.
Yeah, and the excuse they won't pay me for it is just the most asinine thing I've heard in the world.
The line entry is one thing. But I think the technician, I mean, we'll get the estimators, you know, we're going to get down here and we're going to get into included, not included material costs. But I think the technician has to see this as a process, and that it's a process that starts from the repair planning through the repair to the completion of the repair to before the car delivers to the customer. This isn't just a one step and I'm done. This is, I'm building layers upon layers to make the repair last.
And that's kind of how the ICAR class is laid out, the corrosion protection during the repair and corrosion protection after the repair. And they both need to be done.
And then the planning process. So as an estimator and then as a technician, I got a plan for all of these different stages of corrosion protection and rust proofing, and then how that's going to affect either reassembly or delivery. Larry made a great point about doors.
Well, that's what, well, you know, you need checks in each department to try and make sure that your quality check at the end is good and it's easier. But for example, like this door's open here. If I, spray the unicide, I put a new door on and I spray because I watched the show, I sprayed my stuff on there, and then you shut the door, you go home. By the next morning, you're going to stain the freshly painted rocker panel, let's say, because you close the door. You got to leave the doors open. So
now we have to disconnect the battery, though.
Yeah, you got to disconnect the battery, and
that's going to create a whole lot of scans and calibration.
Well, that's not my problem. I didn't wreck the car. I didn't build it. I didn't wreck it. I don't collect premiums.
You could also use plastic sheeting.
You could use plastic sheeting,
which would be
but
a little
you got to
easier.
think.
But you got to think about it.
You got to think about it. You know, so this is where you have to really plan out smart. You know, what you're doing with the car, how you're doing, putting it back together, and what material you're using. Because this stuff is meant to creep into areas, and it's going to take a few days, especially during the hot summer days. It's going to, and you don't want it on fresh paint. Okay, that's the big thing. And you do this in each department, It'll make it easier once you get to your final quality check, because now most of the time the car's put together. I can't check the backside of flanges then.
Nope.
I got to check it in each department.
Yep.
See, quality checks have to go through each department and then a final quality check at the end, not a quick check.
Right. So let's say, I mean, we got to keep in mind a lot of this that we talked about today is not included in panel replacement times or repair times. That it's additional labor, that's an on-the-spot evaluation between the estimator and the technician, and a calculation of what product and materials you think you're going to use. So when we talk about not only do I need to identify the labor that's not included in the estimating system, I now need to identify the material cost. Shawn, you guys have a great tool that's like a rope that helps me manage, you know, how many tubes I think I'm going to use for something.
Right. We also have a program that's brand new, very recently, called Crimp, and it's a program to help recover costs of materials. So if you're just giving this stuff away, you're not doing it properly. So you should be getting paid for these materials.
Right.
But you don't get paid unless you ask.
You know, and one of the biggest things I hear about is that, you know, they go, well, corrosion, you know, seam sealers included in the labor time for the quarter panel. Well, read the P pages. That's for the standard factory application, which is where the factory put it. Right. Not where the factory didn't. So
which means the damaged areas on adjacent panels.
Exactly. And the materials never included.
Right.
Well, as we discussed, you're going to use some material practicing if you have.
Absolutely.
And you're not getting paid to duplicate the appearance. You're getting paid to seal a seam. If you have to do an elaborate replication of a seam, that's really
There's a lot of
another line
labor
item.
involved there.
You have to auger it as you go along and stuff like that. Yeah,
That's a whole other show, actually.
Exactly. Well, yeah, we might even talk about matching at a later date. Bottom line is, as a shop, it's not optional. You have to do it. So the only thing you have to decide is, do I want to do it for free or do I want to get paid for it? So once you come to that conclusion, then now it's a matter of, really, I want to get paid. I don't know of anybody that wants to work for free, especially our technicians. They don't deserve to have to try to do all this for no compensation either. Right. But now I got to figure out how to get paid for it, and I got to get into my P pages. Setting up a QC process for our shop. Since we know rust prevention isn't getting done because we're only selling 6 cans a year of cavity wax, how does QC work for this, Shawn? You deal with it a lot.
Well, there's a number of things you can do. You can hire a third-party entity to come in and do inspections. You can, you can have your estimators do your inspections, but a lot of times they're either too busy or they're really not technical people. So you have to have the right people. I've seen shops that have had really on-the-ball detailers do some of the inspections that really know what they're looking for, and they've been trained to do that. So there's a number of ways you can do it, but somewhere along the line this needs to be inspected.
Yeah.
Well, and shop owners, just talk to you real quick, managers, etc. If you walk in your paint department and your quality control form, whatever it is, which you should have, isn't filled out, I can tell you that this stuff's not getting done. It's just, you look there, it's not filled out, it's not getting done. Well, and that form normally is what we call the pencil whip form.
The pencil whip. Well, here's my take on it. QC isn't something that happens by the detailer when the car's getting ready to deliver.
It's a process.
It's not do QC and, let's check the radio stations.
No.
So if corrosion protection is a process throughout the repair, then QC is a process as well.
Yep.
And it happens multiple times, multiple sign-offs, multiple checks.
Yep. Yes.
Throughout the whole day. So, Shawn, you left us this, the future. So I just want to touch on it a little bit. What's coming our way next as we evolve?
Well, this picture here is just showing using a 1-part urethane seam sealer as a sealer to spot weld through, right? Now, actually Chrysler recommends that is a proper application at this point, but we're going to see hopefully a lot more of this coming. We really never know where exactly the OEMs are headed with this, but we're going to see a lot of different things. We're going to see a lot of different innovations as far as seam sealers go on the horizon. So not things I can really talk about right now, but obviously there's going to be innovations in the future.
That would do away with, I'll do it for you. It would do away with weld-through primers, even seam sealing areas, because you're sealing it in there. It doesn't melt out because of the type of material it is, and it doesn't change the strength of the flange area. So basically what you're doing is you're putting a product in there that's going to get, it's no different than years ago when you used to take a little piece of clear plastic, like the 3M clear plastic you would buy, you put it on a steel rail, you put the aluminum bumper reinforcement on that, and then you bolt it together. Yep. And that was to prevent this friction from happening and galvanic corrosion. Well, that's all you're doing with this. It doesn't change anything. structurally, but what it does do is it prevents a lot of corrosion, and it's simple. It's, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. It's probably one of the smartest ideas you could do is to, if it was up to me, that's how every car that doesn't have adhesive in the middle should be put together.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that would solve a lot of issues in shops and eliminate a lot of corrosion issues.
Yeah. I mean, so let's think about it, folks. It really, at the end of the day, we could give you OEM procedures for free. We could send somebody and teleport them into your shop to tell your technicians how to section and weld properly. But if you're not doing corrosion protection, well, all of it's kind of a waste because it's just going to rust and fall apart. And that's going to put the customer in more danger than the improper procedure would have in the first place. So make a commitment today to sit down as a shop and discuss corrosion protection amongst yourselves as the technicians and estimators. Come up with a standard operating procedure for your shop to ensure that your customers are safe for the long haul, since these cars are staying on the road up to 11 years. We want to make those repairs last a long time. Now, we talked about corrosion protection as one thing that we don't do very well in shops. Well, if there was a number two, well, it's going to be glass. And not just the installation of glass. So a lot of shops go, I sublet that out, it doesn't matter. But when it comes to preparing the glass joints for the reinstall or not using a non-reusable glass.
Your self-etching primers.
Self-etch again.
Never under glass.
Yeah, self-etch is going to come up again next month.
Body filler under it, or non-reusable glass. Moldings, stuff of that matter. So a lot of stuff glass.
Non-reusable glass is on the uptick, especially on minivans and some SUVs and stuff out there. So we are going to talk in November on the 29th, all things glass. So please don't think that just because you don't do glass at your shop that you sublet that out, that you need to miss this show. Everyone from insurers to repairers need to watch this show, and especially if you are subletting, I think you probably got even more of a reason to watch this show.
Well, and more importantly, have your glass company watch it.
Yeah, invite them in.
Because most of them actually don't know.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I'd make my glass guy come sit next to me for lunch on the 29th.
Bring your
Thanksgiving leftovers. We're going to have some lunch together. So be sure and join us on the 29th of November when we talk all things glass. Thanks for joining us today. If you have any questions about anything that we covered here, you can always reach us on the website or on Facebook, and we'd be happy to transfer anything over to Shawn. You guys know that he's in Collision Repair Technicians United on Facebook, answering a lot of our questions a lot of time. We don't know what we'd do without him, but feel free to send us anything we need. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.